Yeah, so obviously I'm going to go over Nina, and basically just from the viewpoint of somebody who's using it, rather than I don't claim to be any expert in it. And so the background of this is when I got my dedicated Astro camera, I realised that I needed something to capture images with. And up until then, with my DSLR, I've been using backyard EOS, and realised obviously I couldn't use that. So initially, I went to Nina as a program to capture images. And I think what I've discovered since I've used it is it does an awful lot more. And there's a variety of different elements that I really like about it. And one of those is the fact that, in effect, it brings everything together onto one platform. So you still have all the other programs, but in effect, it allows you to view and also operate them from one desktop. So you don't have to keep jumping between different programs. And it also automates a lot of the processes. So it talks to all the other programs like PhD2 and will control it. And I think it does a better job of doing that than I used to do. And ever since I've gone to Nina, I seem to be able to guide a lot better than I used to be able to. Now that might be coincidental, but for me, I think, you know, Nina is clearly monitoring a lot of the processes in the background and interacting with them. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll just, can you allow me to share screen?
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure how to do it. I'll just make you host, I think, Mark.
Just down the bottom where it says participants, you just say allow multi-sharing or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it now. So I hadn't done a presentation or anything for this because I thought the easiest thing was to really do it almost real time and show you what it can do. So the starting point obviously has got to be to actually find the software. So I mean, basically, if you just type in Nina and astronomy, you'll find the page. There's a couple of different versions on there. So let's just jump to this. So yeah, Nina, nighttime imaging and astronomy. I think it's one of those things they've tried to fit in. But if you go to Nina, then this is where you download the initial program. Now there are various versions of the software on the Nina site. There's basically what they do is they release the main program that's running, up and running version. Then they also do like a beta version, which is relatively bug-free. And then they also have these things that are called the nighttime builds. And the nighttime builds are in effect something that's been developed. So it's very much almost like an alpha level testing, where in effect there may well be bugs with the nighttime testing. But the idea is that as people report back, as people test it more and more, the nightly testing one evolves over a period of time until it becomes the next beta. The only reason I mention that is because you have the option clearly which one you download, but sometimes there are useful features that come online in the nightly builds that it's worth actually getting hold of. So I'm currently running one of the nightly builds. So you can see on the screen, in effect, it gives the option of getting the full release, the beta version, which is 1.10 at the moment, or the nightly builds. And at the moment, the nightly build we're on is 111, number 30. So I was running, I think it was about number 20, which I've been running for probably about a month or so now. And that I partly got that because they've changed the sequencer, and I wanted to try the 111 sequencer. But what I did today, just to make it current, is I loaded the latest nightly build, and they recommend that you do that. If you're going to go for the nightly builds, try and keep up with the latest version, because as I say, they're fixing those bugs all the way through. And you get, not only do you have the option about which one you download, but when you're in the settings, you know, again, you can get it to alert you and automatically upload the latest version, and you can select what version you download. So if I jump to the actual program now, so this is Nina itself, and when you first look into it, it looks a little bit complicated. But once you start to work your way around, the key, it's not a home page because it doesn't automatically go to that, but the key page, if you like, is this imaging page. So you notice basically down the side there's some icons here, and I can select these icons and bring up different pages. So for instance, I can go to the equipment one, I can go to any of these, but the key one for viewing what's happening and the one that you'll use when you're actually imaging is the imaging one. So that's a good place to start. And in effect, what you've got is you've got some type of central screen, then you've got various other screens around which you can control what you see. So some of these may not be relevant for you. You can just click on the cross and get rid of them completely. Along the top, you've got some add-on, some of these elements which are actually a lot of these ones that are brought up, and then you've got some extra tools there as well. So you can see that a lot of these actually are lit up, and that's because they're already loaded up. Now, one of the things you can do is, if you're not careful, you can delete stuff off this page or lose it and not be able to bring it back. So just so you know, there is a way to reset it. And if you go into the options page, there is a way to actually reset this page. So if you have completely mucked it up and deleted a whole load of stuff and can't find your way back to getting it back on screen, then in effect, you go back to there. So I said this is your main viewing box. And this allows you to do various things, and then the boxes around the edge are extra bits of information. So for instance, down the bottom, this is the PhD monitor. So real time, when I'm tracking with PhD2, my graph will come up here. So again, I don't have to jump to PhD2 to see what's happening. I can view it all off this screen. The key ones initially you might be interested in is the image one. So this shows you the image that you're going to get through your camera. And then how do you get an image? Before I go into a full sequence, I might just want to manually focus my telescope. So if you click on the imaging one, then when the camera's connected, because the camera's not connected at the moment, this will allow you to take an image. You set how long you want the image to be. You can save that image, and you can get it to loop as well. So if you are focusing and you take a 6-second sub, you can just get it to loop round and rotate that, and it will pop it up on the screen for you. But you start it going there, and then you just need to pop back to the image one to actually see it. And so in effect, you can already see there's some functionality just on this imaging thing, and we haven't automated anything yet. So just to explain the other boxes, you kind of get the idea of there's a lot of functionality with Nina, and it's as flexible as you want to use it. If in effect you've just got a telescope connected to a mount, then you can get rid of a lot of these boxes. If you've got an autofocuser, then you can have that. If you want to rotate the image, you can bring up that, even if it's a manual rotator, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then there's also things like there's a weather. So this will bring up real-time weather when it's connected. The graphs are really useful, and I'll cover the graphs a little bit, but that graph there, it measures every time it takes an image, it automatically measures. As long as I've got ticked on that star image at the top, it will measure the size of the star and the number of stars, and it will plot that graphically. And I found that really, really useful when you're actually imaging, because you can pick up quite subtle changes in atmospheric conditions. You can pick up mist and high-level cloud coming across that you may not be able to see yourself, and you can start to see trends as well. So you can say, oh look, it's getting better, it's getting worse, and so sometimes I kind of call the session just because of what's happening on this graph. So this is like the key page, and these tabs, I mean, I can add to these tabs because there's a lot of extra things that I don't use. So I mean, if you go across the top, there's clearly the image one, which is up there, and the camera one, which I've added on as well. I've added on the focuser because I've got the focuser, although there is a manual focus option as well. The rotator, as I say, so I haven't got an electronic rotator, but I can manually rotate through Nina. So Nina will tell me, you know, you said you want to set up your image at this particular angle, and it's not that. So you need to turn the camera by such and such, and it will give you directions for that. The telescope is the mount. Obviously, it has to be connected to the guider. The sequence, which we'll look at in a minute, but it's just setting your subs. Although, again, if you use the advanced functions into your sequence. If you've got one of the Pegasus power boxes, again, you can control it off Nina. That's the weather app. There's a dome control. So again, when you've got your observatory, in effect, integrate it. So you can do things like from this screen, if I click on that now, I can literally add a tab. Oops, double clicked. I can add a tab to it. If I click on the dome control, then that's some of the things that you could do. So you can see the functionalities there from a simple user right the way up to somebody who's using it quite advanced. The statistics, which is that graph in effect, and the table above it. The history, which is the graph one. Again, you can even get flat panels, which are USB controlled, so you can directly control your flat panel from Nina as well. And there is some touch safety monitor, which is some hardware. So I'll go back to image and I'll keep it on that. So I say that's the initial screen. Then we've got these other ones here. So we've got an options one, which is basically where all the settings are. Now I'm not going to go into great detail with the individual settings because the settings will be fairly, you know, unique to in effect your setup, the cameras you're using, the equipment you're using. But I will kind of give a cursory glance over that. The other tabs here, we've got the equipment tab, which is where you sort out, connect all the equipment. We've got an atlas, so you can find your object. And once you've found your object, you can frame. And again, you don't have to go to the Sky Atlas, so you can just call up an object directly from the framing. There's a flat wizard, which I find really, really useful. And I used to struggle a little bit with flats with the DSLR. And I found since I've used Nina that taking the flats has become a lot easier. And then that's the sequencer as well. So to start with, if we go to the equipment one, then this brings up another page. And again, you can just see all of the equipment listed on the side that you could have. And then for each one, in effect, there's some type of actions that you can do on each one. The good thing is once it's all set up, in effect, you just hit the connect button down the end and simply everything works. Of course, it's never that simple. And you have to remember that you've got to turn on all the programs you're going to connect to. So at the moment, down the bottom, you can see I've already got PhD2 running. I've already connected to the mount. I've done all that. And if you don't do that, then obviously I can't connect to it. But if I if I click on connect now, and yes, I want to connect to all the devices, then we get all these joyous boxes popping up, basically to tell me that the mount's connected, focus is connected, the rotator's connected, the guider was connected as well. And what you'll notice is up here, now there's a little symbol that's an icon that's come on in each of those to tell me it's connected. Now, for those of you who are paying attention, you'll notice the camera didn't come up, and that's partly because the camera's still turned off at the moment, so I need to turn the camera on. But just before I do that, let me just show you the some of these. So these are all connected now. So now actually, I've got some functionality directly off here. But if I wanted to adjust the focus with my autofocuser, I can. And if I press that, it will move the focus one step. If I press that, it will move it 5 steps. So I've got that functionality at this level. So again, if you're sorting things out, sometimes it's useful. The rotator, as I say, it either works for an electronic rotator, but it also works for a manual one as well. But you actually have to select a manual and still connect anyway. You have to tell it that you're going to be doing manually rotating. And then I say what it will do is when we come to the sequencing, when we come to the framing, and you decide what angle you want the object to be, it will then tell you how much to rotate it to.
Mark,
yeah.
a quick question. So you know how you've already opened PhD2 in your toolbox and everything. So if you hadn't opened your toolbox and connected to the mount, would you still be able to sort of just connect this to the mount without having the other bits open? Because I think
No.
in APT I can just press connect to scope, which is connecting to the mount without having the toolbox already open.
So I always go into PhD2 first, and I connect the mount, and then I connect the guide camera, and that's partly because I want to make sure that it picks the right camera, particularly when I've got the CMOS running, because in effect often it will see both of them, and I think there's a risk unless you're careful about it. There's a risk you're going to pick up the wrong camera and end up trying to guide with your main camera. So I always do it that way. And I know if you haven't selected the guide cam and you try to connect to PhD2, it will connect, but then when it tries to guide, it will say, well, there's no camera, so it won't physically do that part of it. There is a lot of stuff you can get if you click on the relevant buttons, and I'll show you in the sequence of what you can do with it. But I always do that, and that's partly because that's the process I go through. That in effect, I use SharpCap to do my polar alignment. So I want to connect the mount, and then I connect the small camera to SharpCap, and then I go back through and connect it. So that it's the way I go through it, and I think it just I say it removes the issue of connecting the wrong camera. So under the options, in effect, you've got lots of different settings, as you can expect. And this is my general settings. And a lot of it is it's the type of thing you're only probably going to go in almost once to set up. You define what you want the image file type to be outputted as, whether it's a FITS file or whatever you want. You tell it where you're going to put the images as well. Something that I find quite useful is you can adjust the FITS headings. So I've added the target name, so it always tells me on the file path what the target is. So if you have taken a couple of targets overnight, you can quite easily distinguish them. And you've got there's various different options here. I'm not going to go into the various ones, but that one is the reset button I was saying about. That if you have mucked up where everything is on that imaging one, you hit that and it will just reset it all. And there is, again, for those people who want to do a meridian flip, this is where you just set the settings for the meridian flip. And typically what it does on Nina is it will go past the meridian, because if you stop directly on the meridian, there's a risk that in effect it will try and send it to the exact position it is. So what it says is, let's go past the meridian, let's stop a little bit, and once we're well past it, in effect, then it will do a flip. And there's various other options. So you can tell it, for instance, to automatically refocus after the meridian flip and things like that. So there's various different options. You do enter your camera details, but again, a lot of this gets automatically populated when you connect up your camera. So a lot of this you'll find out has been filled in. You can also have different profiles. So at the moment, you can see at the top, it says it's my white cat, and it's come up 294, but it says it's the white cat. Whereas if I went back to the general one, you can see that I can select other profiles and I can change them. So again, it will remember the different cameras, the different focal lengths, so you just bring up those. One thing I learned was when doing this is just copy one of your previous ones. because most of your settings will be identical. It will only be your focal length and things you're changing. So rather than have to go through everything again, if you just copy it and then rename it. I'm not going to go into detail on the autofocus because I don't think anybody else will be probably running an autofocus at the moment. And then obviously the dome isn't used. The only other one that's the other two that are useful here for the settings, as I say, is the imaging one, which we've gone through anyway. And then the plate solving. Plate solving was another really useful feature of Nina that I use a lot. And so again, you need to set it up. There is YouTube videos online, but in effect, it asks you what your primary plate solving program is going to be. And I use one called ASTAP. And then it talks about a blind solver. So basically your blind solver is, ASTAP works well if it can find you're within a certain tolerance. If you fall outside that, then in effect, blind plate solving, which means you enter a picture and it will scan the whole part of the sky and hopefully solve that. The reason why people don't routinely use blind solving is because it tends to take a lot longer, because in effect, it has no idea where you are. So the ASTAP suggests that you're in a 10-degree window and will do it relatively quickly. And the ASTAP files are loaded up to Nina. So again, I can do that offline, whereas the blind solving, I actually have to have in effect, it uploads the image to the Astronomy Net website. And literally blind plate solving, it probably takes about 5 minutes or so by the time it uploads it and they process and they return the data. But you only blind solve, say, if you fail. A couple of these you have to get API keys for. So ASTAP, you have to download the software onto your laptop to run. So again, this is not solving it itself, it's just talking to the program. You need to go to the website and generate this API key, and the same applies if you want to use the weather program. And again, it's all free to do, just like the software is, but you do have to generate that key and enter it in so that it actually works. One thing that is quite useful here as well is you can adjust the tolerance that you have for both where it's pointed to in the sky and any rotation you've got on that. And obviously that has an impact for if you are rotating your image. So yeah, typically I have mine set down quite low, sometimes even lower than this. I will go down to like 2 arc minutes. Clearly you don't want to drop down to a tolerance that is beyond what you can achieve with your scope, you know, and your mount. Otherwise you'll spend the whole evening there. And the rotational tolerance depends how good you are moving the camera if you're manually rotating. So for my small telescope, for the White Cat, it's relatively easy because it's actually graduated on the back. So when I rotate it, it tells me how many degrees I'm rotating it by. On my larger scope, I don't have that. So often I struggle a little bit more on the large scope, and it will take, you know, 6 or 7 different attempts of getting smaller and smaller till I hit the tolerance. So these are for those. So let's just go now to, first of all, the Sky Atlas. So I say this is where you can look at your targets, and in effect, there's various catalogs built into Nina. It doesn't have everything though. So if I choose something that we know is around in the sky at the moment, and I'll search for that. I'll just put M74 and we'll just search for that. And it finds that as a target. And it tells me a few other things. So it gives me an idea of where it is in the sky at the moment. So we've just gone past the meridian on it. And then it tells me I can add this as a target to sequence. So I can set it up as a sequence if I want to, or I can add it to the set it for the framing assistant. So what we'll do with this one, I'm just thinking this one probably isn't a very good one to pick. So what I'm going to do is, can anyone remember what the Heart Nebula is?
I think it's IC 1805 from memory.
We'll find out.
Yeah, it is.
It is, yeah. So what I'll do is I'm going to use this because this is the M74 is a bit round basically, whereas this has got a bit more shape to it. So if I chuck this into the framing assistant, that will take me now onto that next tab down, and it will bring up this image. Now it takes a little bit of time just to load up the image. So this is now the image now. So it's zoomed in at the moment, so I just need to step back. And so this is, so let me just see what it's doing. So interesting. So I think I've, because this is set up as my different camera as well. But you can, this isn't exactly correct for my setup, but you get the idea that it's brought up a box, which is what it thinks I can see with this focal length with my DSLR camera. So there's 6.4 pixel size is my DSLR. I don't think that is actually right. Because I should be able to see more than that. But the point is, as long as you've got these numbers programmed in right, then in effect you get this box brought up. And from this box now, you could decide, firstly, if you wanted to rotate it. So you can literally decide how you want to set it up. It's also where we control if we want to do a mosaic. So if I do want to do a mosaic, in effect, I can just now select the number of panels I want. So you can see that in effect that would cover it. It's wrong because I say I know with my camera, with this setup, in effect, I can get it in one shot. But you can see how you can do there, and you can even control the overlap. So this is set at 20. If I wanted to take it up to 40%, then I'll just stick in the new figures and it will set all that. And actually, basically, if I now set this as a sequence, if I left it as a mosaic, it would set up a tab for each one of those panels. So on my sequence, if I went for the simple sequence, I would see just literally 8 different tabs, and then I could set up the exposures. I'm not going to leave it set up as a multiple panel, but only because it's going to get very confusing. So for the moment, I'm just going to leave it as one, and we'll just say that we are going to take a picture of the center of the Heart Nebula. So once you've set up, once you've framed your image, in effect, we can go down and we can add the target. The other thing which is worth mentioning just before I do that is you can pull data across from either Stellarium or Carte du Soleil as well. So as well as setting a sequence from the Sky Atlas, in effect, I can just decide, you know, I can pick on something on here that I want to image as a target. And as long as I'm connected, then when I go back to, if I now click on this one, which is get coordinates from planetarium software, it's now jumped to M76, which was what I was looking at. And automatically it's uploading now an image for that. So that's one way you can do it. And you can, once you've generated your sequence, you can also save that as well. So let me just cancel that. And hopefully it will still have this set as a sequence. Let me just go back.
Mark, you know, if you were to do an imaging sequence, but you weren't able to finish your sequence on one night, would you be able to pick up where you left off with the sequence, or would you have to sort of start it again on a subsequent imaging session?
So you can save the sequence, and I'll show that on the next page. So as I say, what I'm going to do now is I've gone back to the Heart Nebula. I'm going to set this up, and it gives me two options. It gives me the option set up as a simple sequence, or set it up as a to the sequencer. Now I'm going to go for the simple sequence because I think the advanced one is a little bit over the top for what we do. I think it's more aligned to, you know, somebody who's doing mono imaging, changing of filters, all the rest of it, and wants to automate all that process. So I'm just going to set it up as a simple sequence. So I've selected that. I've now jumped to the sequence tab. So all these tabs that we're going through down here are just the ones down here that we started off on Sky Atlas, we went to framing, and we're now on the sequencer one. So you can see that it's got the target at the top, and then there's a variety of different options that are coming up. I've also got the autofocus ones as well. So what I can do here is once you know the program, it's quite easy to set up. So routinely what I would do is I want it to start guiding when it starts. I want it obviously to slew to the target. Normally I'd get it to rotate to whatever I'd set it to. And I also want it to center. So centering is the plate solving. So it's going to send it to where it thinks the target should be, and then it's going to check that by plate solving, and it will carry on moving it until it gets within that tolerance that I've set. Because I've got the autofocuser, I also turn on one of these, and again, there's just multiple different options, and the only one I just turn on is this one down at the end. And typically, what I want it to do is if the star focus, so the size of the stars, increases by 5%, then I want it to refocus. So that's literally told it to do that. So I'm just going to I'll minimize that. And then this is the basic sequence. So we tell it what we're taking. So initially I'm going to be taking lights. I am going to diver, so I turn the dithering on. And actually routinely what I tend to do is I tend to dither every third image. Tell it how many, what length for exposure. So I'm going to take 150 second subs. And how many do I want to take? Well, for this I'm going to take, say, 24. And that is now set up. You'll also notice that there's some extra ones here that we can add in about calling the camera, not relevant for either my two cameras. Unpark the mount is useful to keep on because I often send it back to a parked state and forget to unpark it, and then wonder why when I start the sequence everything just points in the wrong direction. So unpark the mount. And then again, if you want to, you can also add in your park mount at the end as well. So that's set up my basic sequence now for this target. And then in effect, what I can do is clicking down the bottom here, I can save this as a sequence. So in effect, if I just delete that sequence, then it gives me various different options here. And one of them is to load a target. So if I click on this, lo and behold, here's some I've prepared earlier. So these are some of the other targets I've used. And one of those is in effect the Heart Nebula from a previous imaging that I did on the 5th of December. And so in effect, that's where you can set up all your parameters. You can come back. And that means that, yeah, if you have been taking a mosaic, then in effect, you know you've already taken panel 1 and 2, and in effect you can come back and do panel 3 and 4.
What happens if it doesn't find a guide star?
but it would do what PhD normally does and throw up an error. So we'll I'm hoping that I can actually simulate it actually running. So I'll click start in a minute, but in effect it's just the same as you using it manually. That, you know, if you couldn't find a guide star, or PhD2 couldn't find a guide star, then it will throw up an error, and it does the same type of thing.
So sorry, does PHP then spring into action to give you a chance to change things, or?
Yeah, I mean it's here, it's running in the background all the time.
Yeah.
So it's always there. So you still get that, when the clouds come across and it does that annoying binging noise, you still get that. So there are times when I will go back and have a look at it, but most of the time, actually, I've got a fair idea what's going on just from looking.
Would it actually stop the sequence running?
I see. This is where I think that it's automated, because it's never stopped the sequence. For me, what I think happens is that Nina tells it to find another guide star, and it carries on running like that. And that's one of the bits that didn't used to happen before I used Nina. So if you're imaging and you come inside for a cup of coffee or whatever and go back out and find it's lost the guide star, and at the moment you're not tracking properly, whereas Nina doesn't seem to do that. So this is where I think the automation comes in, that Nina's monitoring what PhD2 is doing, and we'll tell it to correct things.
Okay.
So we've now set up our basic sequence, and so now I can just start it from here. But if I just go back to imaging now, then in effect, I need to just. So I still haven't connected my camera, have I? So I just need to turn on and connect up my camera now, because that's still off. So let me just go to the. So click on camera. What I do is tend to let it rescan, because I've just turned that on. Get it pull down, and the camera isn't there, so we'll just do it again. It's one of those things, sometimes it doesn't always see it straight away. If it doesn't, what I do is I normally pull out the cable and plug it back in again, because that seems to be a good techie solution. Yeah, let's just do that. So I'm just going to literally unplug it back in. Now, interestingly, let's just check. That sounds better. I think it was turned on. There we are. So the camera's popped up now on the list. So hopefully, if I rescan, and there's the Canon. So I can now connect to that, and the camera's connected. So now I've got everything connected that I needed to have connected. So now if I go back to imaging, it now tells me that I can start. Just check everything else. Now, I just need to check exactly what I've asked it to do, because obviously some of this I can't get it to do because I'm not outside. So I am actually going to have to turn off the plate solving, because obviously it's not going to plate solve. I also don't want to rotate either, because for the same reason I'm not actually going to take an image. So now, fingers crossed, and there's a bit of cheating going on here, but if I now, so if you, I'm getting ready to stop match. Okay, so it's moved them out. I take it you can see them out at the moment. So it's moved them out, and you get basically down here. It tells you what it's doing. So it's moved them out, and now it's starting to guide. So I'm not going to go back to PhD2 at the moment. We'll just literally just see what's happening, see what's going to come up on the screen. Right, let's just see. So you can see when I bring this up, it is auto selecting a star, and it is guiding now. And okay, I've had to cheat. I've had to fit a tomato soup box over the end of my guide scope with some holes in the end, try and get it to enable it to guide. It just wants me to change it to bold mode. This is part of the fun of having which I've done. And in effect now what it's doing is it's started to do the imaging sequence. And you can see up here, it gives you an estimated time it's going to finish this run. You notice that the exposure time's changed, and that's because the this was one of the ones that I had saved, so it's a different set of exposures. And then now you've got so now you've got the graph started to build up from PhD2, so you can see it kind of live coming up on here. It's going to be a very strange graph because I'm literally guiding on a pinhole in a cardboard box. So the guiding is going to look very, very strange. But at the moment, it's now taking exposure, which is, for this, it's set at 365 seconds, and it's now capturing that. The other ones that I didn't mention across the top, on this, when we got this imaging up, there's a few other ones that are really useful along here. So this little magic wand here is an auto stretch. So if you enable that, in effect, it will stretch your image so you can see what you're looking at. It doesn't save that stretch at all. It's literally just so you can get a good idea of what you're actually looking at. And then the other one is this star analysis one. And this is the one that plots onto this graph. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll leave that running in the background a minute. I'll just show you a couple of other things while that's running. And then you, in effect, will get an image. Now, of course, I've just got the lens cap on my telescope, so we'll get, in effect, I'm doing a dark image. So we'll see some noise anyway from my amp. Oh no, you won't actually. You'll see lots of noise from the camera. You won't get amp noise on this one. So what I was going to do is just show you a couple of images. I mentioned that that graph that comes up, and this is just literally just taken off my screen. But this is the graph that gets built up over a period of time. And each one of these dots, obviously, is a sub. And the blue circles are the number of stars that it's seeing. And the red circle is, in effect, the focus. So it's the size of the stars, the average size of the stars. And what you can see here is there was an almighty dip in the number of stars that were seen. And that will have been some cloud, high-level cloud, mistiness passing over, which has resulted in a big drop in the number of stars that I could see. Now, I say, if you're sitting outside, I doubt whether you've probably have noticed that. But what you can see is from the rest of my imaging run, actually, the viewing conditions were improving over the night. They were getting better and better and better. So that's the type of night where it's worth staying out there for. And you can detect probably a very subtle increase there of the star size, but it's not been enough to trigger an automatic refocus. So it's just slightly drifting upwards. And that might be just a change in temperature. But again, the star size itself can relate to your viewing conditions. The other night, when everybody had all the fun outside, that my graph was just absolutely terrible. Basically the stars, it was just up and down like this, and you could see it was like all over the place. And also my HFR was kind of waving around in step with it as well. And so it was one of the ways that you could tell actually how poor the viewing was. And then the other one is just a screenshot of the autofocus. That, I say, Nina's got an autofocus function. So if you've got a focuser connected, there is a batten-off feature, so you can analyze a batten-off mask if you've got one. But if you want to automate it, I think the autofocus is probably more accurate than using a batten-off mask. And basically all it does when you run an autofocus sequence is it just takes pictures. And again, it just measures how big the stars are. And then it moves the focus a little bit and it retakes that and it plots that graphically. And then when it gets to a certain limit, it will go the opposite way. And so you end up with a stage where the tightest part of the stars was in effect where they were most in focus. And it will record that number. It extrapolates it a little bit because obviously it recognizes that that point might be between steps. So it will plot it graphically and work out your exact focus point. And it will then know that. Right. So I've just gone back to the main Nina program, just only because you'll just see one of the images coming up, or the first image coming up. We're now at 350 seconds out of 365, so we've got another 15 seconds, and the first sub will be displayed. Now again, the lens cap's on, you're not going to see an awful lot, but again, it just shows you how. So that's the first image just taken. And if you remember, it was only going to dither every third images, so I'm not expecting it to dither for this one. And when it dithers, it annotates it with a little triangle on the graph as well, so you can see the dithering process again without having to jump off. Okay, so a very noisy image there, but it's not surprising because I think the ISO is set quite high on this one. So this setup was actually for my CMOS camera rather than my than DSLR. But yeah, the ISO is at 894, so it's not that high. But this is my resultant image. Again, at the moment that's zoomed in, so I just click on that to get the image as a whole. And this is that stretched image. So if I click on that, I can toggle off the stretching. So that's my kind of raw image without stretching it. And you do find that will actually reveal quite a lot of the images we're after. So you'll get a quite good hint. You can adjust how aggressive your stretching is, again, from going in the options. And then the other one that I say to keep on is that star one, because then that will add the points in on the graph. Now, obviously, it's not going to just change with basically a dark image. It also gives you the image history, and that will be, if we were imaging and this was a real sub, you'd obviously see stars on that as well. So you've got an idea of what you took last time, and you can see, where you've got any ones where you've got clouds coming over or whatever. The other thing from this front, I can put it into night mode as well, just by clicking on that eye. So I can turn it into onto the red. And in fact, you can actually set various different colors. I'm going to stop that imaging run because there is no point in doing that. But how does it save the images? So again, you remember I said, you know, in effect, you tell it where you want the images to go to. So I just, I dump it in with my pictures. So if I click on pictures, you can see I've basically got a folder here called Nina. And so if I go into that, I just have these folders. Now again, Nina automatically creates these folders. And you can see that I've added some in there as well. And then if I, in effect, if I go to light, then there's some different ones that come up. There's some ones left over from another imaging session, which I haven't cleared out, but basically that's the one that we've just taken. So that's our first sub. If I've got it set up, if for instance I told it to take a load of darks, then they will Nina will automatically put that into the darks folder. So it will work out where you're setting them up to. The other thing I didn't mention was the flat wizard. So I'll say the flat wizard is really, really useful. I'm just going to stop it guiding at the moment because it's having slight hiccups here. Let me just stop PhD2 actually guiding.
Mark, just a quick observation. I noticed that when it took the first frame, in the statistics box at the top right, it changed it recognized how many pixels the camera was. So it went from 640 to 480 to 5496 3670. So did it automatically recognize what camera you were using then, or?
Yeah, and I think the reason why I was having problems with the framing wizard earlier on was because the camera wasn't connected.
Yeah.
And I suspect now if we go back to this, if I was to rerun this, actually I'd get a more accurate representation of my sensor size on there.
Yeah, because you could change that width and height to what it just had, wouldn't it? So it was 5496 and something else, wasn't it?
Yeah, I suspect that's why. It's because I've probably been playing with it before, and if the camera was connected, then these would be correct.
Well, yeah, so it would have automatically populated that, would it?
Yeah. So I say the other thing that I find really useful is this flat wizard function as well. And basically this just means that at any time you want to, so if some clouds come across and you've got a spare 5-10 minutes, you can do your flats. Depending on what camera you're using, you can also do your dark flats as well. So if I'm using my dedicated Astro camera, I will do my dark flats, and typically I take 25 of each. And basically all you have to do, you tell it the whereabouts in the histogram you wanted. So often people talk about the histogram being in either the first third, and I find setting this somewhere between 30 to 50 works for me. The good thing is actually that because you can vary it a little bit, it does mean that if it comes up and says that it's too dark or it's too light, yes, I can move the light away or move the light closer or make the light brighter, but I can also adjust where I want the histogram as well. So in effect, all you have to do is put your white t-shirt over your camera, shine it at your light source, whether that's your flat panel or whatever it is, and then you literally just press go. And it will see how bright it is. You've told it what setting you want for the histogram there, and it will come up and it will tell you, is it too dim, is it too bright, and if it isn't those, and if it's okay with it, then it will just do a run of your 25. If you're not using DSLR and you want your dark flats, at that time it will tell you to put the lens cap on, press go, and then it will also take your dark flats as well. And I just find this is a much more accurate way of doing flats than just kind of eyeballing it. So I think for me, the bits that I really like on Nina is the flat wizard. It's the plate solving. It's the automation that I've hinted at, that in effect, Nina is actually telling things to talk to things at a certain time. And the fact that everything's on one screen. For me, those are the bits that I really like. What I didn't show you was the advanced sequencer. So this is the basic sequencer. This, and you can add different runs. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could actually also set up on the basic sequence. For instance, after I've done that, I want to do some darks. So I can actually set up a couple of different things happening. If I had an auto filter wheel, I could even change filters and things like that. I don't, but one of the things you can do is you can set it up as an advanced sequence. So I'll just show you what the advanced sequence looks like. I don't routinely use this because I think it's a little bit over the top what we want. But in effect, I've now set this up as an advanced sequence, and what this basically allows you to do is it gives you a lot of different options. So it tells you, for instance, when we're starting, do you want to add some triggers? So for instance, do you want to open your dome roof before you start, or make it so that you can't do certain things? So you can add various events, and all these things down the outside are events. So for instance, when I start, I might want to call my camera, so I can literally just drag that across, and I should be able to just drop it in as an event. This is the preparation it does. This is the imaging, and you can see you can like bed in loops and things like that. So you can make it loop until you reach to a certain time. But then you can also have your different filters set up as well. So basically, I don't use this. I think it's beyond what I need. And basically, a lot of my imaging, I image until the clouds come across, rather than deciding, I need to image this, for 5 hours or whatever. So I can see how this would be useful if you were some nice dark sites where the weather was always in your favor, and you could just decide exactly what you wanted to do, set it all up. You could set up, tell it to change the filters, tell it how many you wanted for each filter, and you could basically let it run itself overnight. But I don't routinely use that. If you do use it, you'll see that when we go to imaging, you've now got this advanced sequence list coming up here. So again, you get a bit of an idea where you are in your sequence, and it'll tell you where you are. And apparently one of the advantages is you can adjust things on the go. So, if you decide you want to change the number of exposures, you can do that without stopping it as well. But for me, the basic sequence works. Was there anything that I haven't covered? Any questions or anything that you'd like to see a bit more detail on? I think it's one of those. There's a lot of YouTube videos online for helping with the setup. What are the things I try to think about? What are the things that I've learned about it that I did wrong? I think a lot. You can get thrown with some of the settings, and sometimes there are multiple different places to set settings as well. So one of the problems I've had happened once, in fact, was around dithering. That in effect, if you think what happens when the mount dithers, it has to stop. It then has to restart guiding, and that process can take a bit of time. So you have to add a bit of a pause in a number of seconds before you start image again. And if you don't do that, in effect, the first image you take post dithering, the mount was either still be moving or trying to re-guide, or there'll be a pause in guiding. And so in effect, you can end up with every third image, you get some movement on the stars. And as I say, when you go in, you're not sure, is that an issue with your dithering? Is it something that you have to set somewhere else? So sometimes it's difficult to know where to set things, and I think sometimes some of the settings add up if you're not careful.
Can I ask a quick question about the rotation thing? So imagine you set up your sequence and you said you wanted to frame the target in a certain way.
Yeah.
So would Nina then take the first exposure and then tell you, where would it tell you how far off your rotation you are then?
So before it starts imaging, so if you go back, to the sequence, we're on advanced sequence now, aren't we? Let me just. So if you remember earlier on when I, let me just see if I can quickly.
So, yeah. So I think so. It will do it based on the live view, will it, rather than after your first exposure? So
in effect, it plate solves before you start your imaging run.
Okay. And how would it just? Okay, fine. And okay.
Right, here we go. So if you look here, when I tick these, this is what it's going to do. The first thing I want it to do is to start guiding, and for it to do that, it's going to move the telescope to the right place in the sky. It's then going to rotate and it's going to center. So in effect, actually what happens is when you click go, you see the mount move. When we go to imaging here, if you remember, I told you it comes up down here. So the first thing it says, slewing, moves the mount to the right part of the sky. It will then plate solve. And what happens with plate solving is, in effect, you get another little window open here. I'm just going to see if it will let me actually plate solve the code. I'm just going to see if it will let me plate solve, even though I'm not actually got something on it. So yeah, so what happens is you get a small box that comes up here, which is your plate solved image. It will then, in effect, it goes through what it's saying here, prepare exposure, and then it comes up as plate solving. Because it's using ASTAP, I'm hoping it will actually do a lot of this now. Analyzing stars. Now, of course, it's going to fail because there aren't any stars. So that's the image it's plate solving at the moment. So you might not be able to see down here, it says plate solving, and then in a minute it's going to say failed. If we were running this outside, normally what it says the first time you run this is it says target outside tolerance, something like that. So it then says re-slewing to target. It will then replate solve until, in effect, it's happy it's got you down to the position. Once it's happy it's got you at the position, it then plate solves for rotation. So it opens up another image, it plate solves that, and then comes up at that stage and says, actually, you need to rotate the camera 46 degrees counterclockwise or clockwise. So it will tell you how much to move it. You move it, you click on OK, it will then replate solve. It will replate solve for your position, replate solve for your rotation. And once you get that correct, it will automatically then progress on to guiding. And then as soon as it's guiding, it will start your first image. This is what I mean about the blind plate solving, because Aztap couldn't solve that. What it's now doing is it's sent that to astronomy.net, and it will just take a while to do that. So I'm just going to stop it doing that. So it's fairly, it just tells you what to do in effect, but you do have to connect the rotator, even though you physically haven't got one and you're manually doing it. You still have to actually. So that was one of the things I didn't do the first time, and I couldn't understand why.
Have you used APT?
Never. So I'm not suggesting this is better than, because I've never used it.
No,
but I do like it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering for me in particular whether it offers enough extra over APT, because APT does do quite a few of these things. It doesn't do all of it. So I'm just wondering whether you actually had used APT and that's why you've moved to this, you know, for a reason. But you haven't used it, so you haven't got a reason.
No, I'd heard quite a lot of good things about Nina, which is why I just went for this. And I say it's worked for me, so I stuck with it.
Yeah.
Rick,
my problem with Nina is my current laptop doesn't like it very much. It fails to open sometimes, whereas APT does actually run. So I don't know whether it's got a higher spec required for it to work.
Maybe. I mean, I must admit, I've not had any problems. I mean, occasionally it glitches, like most software does.
Well, if you're running the nightly builds, you can expect that. I mean, they are what they say. They're not in the finished versions. They're not tested as being stable, are they?
No.
Effectively, you're doing the testing for them.
The other things, I mean, I don't know if it's probably not useful for anyone, but you can run 2 instances of Nina simultaneously as well if you wanted to. So if when you've invested in lots of telescopes and mounts, and in effect you want to run it off one laptop, you can do that with Nina. So I could open up a second instant of Nina now and have that running. But no, I say what I like about Nina is it's one of those things that seems to work for me. You have to get your head around the layout a little bit. But once you've done that, it seems to be, you know, I can quite quickly, you know, set up a target if I want to, and I can do that sat in the garden. It's not that complicated. And if I've saved it from a previous imaging, it's even quicker because I just load it up, make sure the gain's what I want it to be, and exposure, and then just hit go, and it goes.
I think it's fair enough that if it works for you, and that's great. It's, you know, there's always quite a steep learning curve taking on software like this, because it's not a simple matter of just you're going to get it up and running the first night. You're not. What I tend to do with software like this is I would actually reduce it to the minimum features first, and just slowly introduce one feature at a time.
Yeah, and as I say, there's a lot of stuff on here I'm not using that I can get rid of if I want to, and which makes it less scary. You know, I haven't got a filter wheel, so you know I can just get rid of that. I haven't got a flat panel. Well, I have, but not when I can connect to here. So you can see, as you say, by reducing it to what you need, it suddenly becomes a little bit more friendly anyway. And having that reset button is really helpful. There's a number of times where, you know, you can literally, if you're not careful, if you do something like close that, that you can't always get some of the stuff back. So I mean, I should be able to just click on that and get it back. Yeah, so it did bring it back that time. But sometimes there's some things you just lose, or you move around and you can't get them back. So just having that reset option is really helpful.
I think to be honest, from what you've showed us, I think even the common features that APT has with Nina, they're just slightly more automated in Nina, for example. So for example, the bit about plate solving and centering where your telescope's pointed to, you can do that in APT, but you need to do some manual components to that. So for example, you'll have to plate solve, then you have to click a sync button so that it syncs to planetarium software, and then you have to reissue a go-to command to recenter it. So I think even for the common features that both programs have, it's just slightly more automated in Nina, which is pretty good. Yeah, it's I'm pretty impressed with it.
Yeah, and I think saving stuff is, I must admit, I haven't been routinely doing that. And that means that every time I build a sequence, I'm building it up from scratch. And I think the risk with that is that, you start it running and you realize you haven't turned the dithering on, or, you've forgot to click one of these. Whereas actually, if you've already got targets saved or built it up beforehand, then all these settings will get saved with it as well. So that definitely saves time, and there's certain things that unfortunately if you don't turn the right thing on, certain things won't happen. I mean, literally, the worst happens if you forgot to start guiding. You won't find that out, unfortunately, until you get into taking your first exposure. So I mean, I struggle sometimes to think why some of these are optional. Why would you want to start a sequence and not slew to your target?
Yeah, you think one button would do all that.
Yeah, but I think sometimes they're maybe trying to be a little bit too clever, thinking of all different eventualities. So a lot of these, there almost needs to be a kind of default on for them. I think would be useful. The only thing I haven't mentioned is support. So the recognized channel for support is something called Discord, which is basically another app. But basically, if you come down here to About Nina, that will just go through to the website, and one of the things it will tell you about is this Discord link here. And so basically, this is it's a chat room basically, but it's I think it's a bit of a techie type chat room site, and so there's various different channels, and one of the channels on here is Nina. What they like is that if you've got any problems, they like it to go through the Discord group. There are some Facebook groups, but they don't like the technical discussions to go through the Facebook groups. They prefer it to go through Discord. So I've got Discord on my phone. I must admit, I've never actually had to get to the stage of asking them any questions, but it's just like any chat type site. There's various different, they'll tell you about the nightly releases. They'll tell you about coming up major releases. There's an area you can say, I've got this camera and this camera's not working. Is there any way around it? Or I found this bug. So it is quite useful. It's well supported with documentation as well, which I think is often one of the things that some of these some of the freeware and shareware products sometimes fall down on. So again, if you click on the question mark down at the bottom, that will bring up the manual, and the manual itself, I say, is relatively good. So in effect, as a starting point, if there's something you want to have a look at, you can go through. You can look at the tabs we've been talking about. That's the Flat Wizard one, but I think it's a good level of information that's comes with it, and obviously my second port of call tends to be YouTube, and there's a few people who I think are quite supportive of developing some of the resources on here, who post some really useful YouTube things as well. I think that was probably about it.
I had one more question, Mark. If you set up a sequence that's some light frames and then dark frames, What happens between after it finishes the light frame sequence? Does it tell you to put the lens cap on, or will it just start automatically trying to take darks without telling you? Or?
So I must admit, personally, because I'm never sure what the weather's going to do and how long I'm going to be out there for, I don't tend to automate that part. What I normally do is, I set this at 36 exposures. Once it gets to 12 and the clouds have rolled in, at that point I'll stop. So I'll press stop. I'll come back to the sequence here. I'll change it to. So all you have to do is you have to reset it down here, because obviously it's logged so many exposures. You then change that to darks, and then because now you're taking darks, actually I don't want it to center, and I don't want it to rotate either, and I don't want it to guide. And then I press go again, and now it will just take my darks. So that way, actually, if the clouds roll in and you lose half an hour, well, you can do half an hour of darks, and then once they've stopped, you can change back to your lights and you can carry on running with your lights. So I don't tend to automate that process. The other thing.
Sharp cap, when you're doing your initial calibration at the beginning, tells you to put your lens cap on, doesn't it? To take some, and I would imagine that this program would just stop at that point and then say, with a pop-up dialog box saying put it on, and it won't go any further till you said okay. Otherwise, there's no point. It would just start taking darks without the lens cap on.
And that's what the Flat Wizard does as well.
Yeah.
The other thing is, obviously, I don't think any of us have got filter wheels, but if you had a filter wheel, you can select your filter. So I've actually put the filters that I use, only that in effect it will annotate the fits with that as well. The other thing which is quite clever, again, you can call it an advanced feature, but when you've got the autofocus set up, you can tell it that actually, this filter focuses slightly different from when you haven't got the. So you can have a focus offset for your filter. So in effect, it knows that when I use this filter, I have to change the focus a little bit.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So in effect, you can build up an understanding of all your filters and any offsets, and then that could be applied automatically. Again, that's more if you've got a filter wheel, that in effect, when it rotates to that next filter, it now knows I need to adjust the focus by such and such. So, there are lots of those advanced features buried in this that could be really useful in the future for people. So I think for me, if you like, I think Nina will grow with me. As I need to do more, I think Nina will help me do that as well.
I think one of the best things about this type of software is being able to create a sequence, or a plan as it's called in APT, where you can set it up to take different exposures, even change the ISO, and just go away and leave it doing it. Because if you want to do, say, Orion, and you want to get the core, but you also want to get the outer nebula, you want a different exposures, and you can set it up to do that and just leave it doing it.
Yeah, and you can obviously do that just on this.
Yeah.
So obviously it refers to ISO on this as gain.
Yeah.
But I am connected to my DXLR.
I was saying that was good of this type of software. It's to have this set of exposures that are different.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be there. Because some of your exposures are very short. You don't want to be fiddling around with the camera. It's difficult with an intervalometer to do that. Well, you can't do it with an intervalometer, but you can do it with a programmed plan or sequence like this.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. I think that's been a good overview. It's good to see it in action.
Well,
I wonder if we'd actually ever be able to even do this sort of thing on a live target ever.
Well, if it was good weather, yes. But I mean, to be honest, it's probably just worth recording recording it when you could, rather than trying to get a group of people.
Yeah.
Did you like the pictures in the background, by the way, on my mount?
I recognise them.
Is that Ribble Head?
Yeah, I took them off the calendar pictures and just I had them rotating around.
Who did Ribble Head?
What is it on? Is it on a projector or? I don't get it.
It's on a green screen.
Oh, I see. Oh, that makes sense.
But it's I set them up as a little video, a looped video, so that it just moves the images a little bit. Brilliant.
Well, it's the first time I've ever watched somebody taking pictures of the inside of a tin can.
No, it's a cardboard container. I wanted to be able to guide so that I could actually start a sequence, and I was trying to think how could I could get it to think that there was stars there. So I got an old cardboard box, stuffed it over the end, and made some holes in the end. And I'm still not sure if it's actually guiding off that or a hot pixel, but it's picking up something anyway. So
are you shining a light into it or something?
Well, no, I've made some holes in the end with pin, so there's some pinholes in the end.
Yeah. So it thinks the light in your room is stars. Yeah. Oh, we're frozen.
But it worked anyway. There was something it picked up on. Brilliant.
Thanks.
It's a crap acronym, by the way.
Yeah, I did think that. It doesn't really work, does it? It's one of those things where somebody's tried to make something fit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's stuck, hasn't it? People use it.
Yeah, I mean, the website, I think it's EU, isn't it? So
yeah,
it's an EU-based group.
Don't know.
Great, thanks for that, Mark. I think I'm going to download it and familiarise myself with it, and then maybe have a go next time round. See how it goes.
I don't think you'll find the advanced sequencer on the alpha or beta one. Sorry, the beta or the normal release one.
Yeah,
I don't think you probably want the advanced sequencer at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
I'll
just get the normal release, to be honest. Do it that way first.
Not all the targets are listed on its database, and there are no planets on there either. So it's probably just as well Paul wasn't here. But as I say, you do have the option of importing from Stellarium or Castle Solar. So in effect, you can tell it a target. I've not had to go with like the space station or anything like that.
I downloaded that. Is it called Sky? What's it called? There's a name for it.
Yeah.
It's supposed to track the space station with ASCOM.
Yeah, I've had a go, and I've had a go at tracking some satellites one night, and it seemed to work very well.
But did you see that young lad that did it? Did you see his image?
Yeah.
I mean, his video was incredibly wobbly, and obviously Pip stabilised it for him. But the image he got out of it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, when I get mine, I'm at 1,000 millimeters, but he's with a Dobsonian. I think he must have been at 2,000, something like that. He had a Barlow as well, I think.
Yeah, you did.
So something to try.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, is that it? I think.
Yeah, probably. It's meteor time, isn't it?
Yeah. And you recorded it, haven't you, Martin? Yeah.
Yeah, it's still recording. Yeah. So I'll put it together for tomorrow, and it'll just appear in the same format as the other ones. It's sort of established a format with a header and a bit. Eddie, I'll have a quick look at it. I don't think there's any bits to take out of this one. I mean, generally what I do with it when I look at them is I chop the beginning off and sometimes the end, because it's just waffle that we don't need. And then if there's a bit in the middle where it doesn't quite go well, I'll often just chop a bit out where we're just waiting for somebody's laptop to start working again or whatever. So you don't generally notice that it's been chopped out. It's just, you don't want to be sat there just waiting when there's nothing happening on screen. But with this one, I don't think there is. So, yeah, we'll do that for tomorrow.
Thanks again, Mark.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks for hosting.
Cheers, Mark.
No problem. See you all later.
Yes.
See you around.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.